everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on rashpixel.fm. I'm Pete Wright, and right over there is Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Pete Wright.
Hi, Nikki. How are you?
I'm doing quite well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. You look good. You look sharp. Are you preparing for some sort of a big meeting or something? Like everything's just working for you right now.
Oh, yeah, it is.
You sound good. You sound like a pro.
Yes, good. Thank you. And you're being sarcastic because nobody really knows behind the scenes that it took us 36 minutes to get this recording started.
See, I was trying to change the tone a little bit.
Yeah.
I was trying to change the tone with a nice compliment.
Right,
and,
Now
going
into a big
truth.
Meeting. A big meeting with you.
Got a big presentation coming on here. Well, I'll tell you, I say I'm good, but that's just what you say. I had a tough weekend. I lost a dear friend and mentor who died of a heart attack quite suddenly, and I find myself quite impacted by these kinds of things. And it got me thinking. It got me thinking about kind of just. It got me thinking kind of deeply about control, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about control and see if you have any thoughts on control and how we control our lives, particularly in the context of ADHD. I hope that this is an interesting thing. It was my turn for a show, and I'm throwing a Hail Mary. So let's see how that hits everybody. Before I do that, head over to takecontroladhd.com. You can get to know us a little bit better. You can listen to the show right there on the website or subscribe to our mailing list, and you'll get an email with the latest episode each and every week. You can connect with us on Twitter or Facebook at Take Control ADHD. But most importantly, if anything that we have done over the last, 7-8 years has touched you and your relationship with ADHD, we would suggest that you consider supporting us monetarily. You can do that. You can throw a couple of bucks our way over at patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. It's an easy way to support the show and help us continue to grow and change and invest in new equipment and look at new things. There's also all sorts of great stuff you can get. First of all, you get access to our Discord channel, which is a great home for ADHD chat with folks all over the world, and they are wonderful, and you should meet them and hang with them because they're always there, and they always, after a long, tough weekend, jumping into Discord was the light of my morning. And you get access, especially at our higher tiers, to things like our workshop library, our Nikki's ongoing worksheet development and tools and resources that we're constantly putting together. We've got another workshop coming out this week, which is very exciting. We've got our monthly workshop. It's coming out this week, and so I can't wait to get that out there. And you'll get access to it by becoming a supporter on Patreon. So we appreciate you considering to do that. Patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. Okay, so Nikki.
Yes.
Hi. How are you?
I'm doing well, Pete, but I'm a little worried about you.
No, there's nothing. I'm okay.
You're okay.
I got up,
right.
I showered and shaved. Everything's great.
All right.
When I say shaved, it's really just the neck. That's
I was going to say, you have a beard. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
okay, got it.
So here's this premise that I've been working through. And tell me what you think of this.
Okay.
As an ADHDer, right, I spend a lot of time on my own accommodations. Right. I have worked hard to put processes and tools and systems in place, right, that help me feel like I'm more in control, like I have control of my life and my day. Right. You would agree. That's what we do.
That's a lot of what we talk about. Right.
That's what we talk
absolutely.
about. So, I end up having these rigorous calendaring and systems and gated time, protecting my time so I can focus. It's all protecting my time and space, doors closed, all those things. I have templated projects in my to-do system. So I have this zealous adherence to every repeating task that comes on, because if I don't have it show up, I won't do it. Right. But that means I go through a lot of tasks. And if you don't live with ADHD, you're going to look at my tasks task list and you're going to say, you're nuts. There is something wrong. Why do you need to do this every week? I have alarms. Something's always constantly binging and buzzing. And I have music and sound. It has to create this suitable noise floor for my brain to actually be able to turn on. And of course, I have all my fidgets and gadgets. And I think this one's a dog toy. It's just a rubber ring. But I'm constantly squeezing it. And let me tell you, my grip is fantastic.
Is it? Well, good.
Yeah.
Getting some exercise
That's
in
right.
too.
My ADHD drives fitness. So these are things that over the years, I've come to learn how to forgive myself for requiring them in my life. Because for a long time, I was full of judgment and doubt. Like, why do I need all this? Why do I need this stuff?
Right.
But, having all these things, among many others, these are things that keep me focused when I otherwise cannot. So
right.
I'm definitely singing to the choir, right?
Yes.
But to the outside observer, when you start doing these things, bringing these things to the office, right, you get the responses are, they're hard to hear, all my gated calendaring stuff. Well, getting time with Pete is difficult. He's never available. Oh, he just doesn't like to work with other people. Oh, Pet Pete, he doesn't play well with others. Right. That perspective shift, it's hard to hear. All my templated projects with my zealous adherence to repeating tasks. Oh, Pete's memory is terrible. He just can't build habits. He's an annoying taskmonger. There's just something wrong with him. He's dumb. Right. He just can't keep that. Right. This is just kind of the perspective turn. Right. There's alarms. Oh, Pete's the noisiest guy in the office. He's always binging and bonging. Right. He don't sit next to him in meetings. Something's always going to buzz, or he's a control freak. He drives meetings with his own alarms, even meetings he doesn't own. There's just he makes his schedule everyone's schedule. Right.
Are these really true things that have been said?
Yeah. So this was before I worked for myself, and this is one of the reasons I kind of got on this, is thinking back to a past job, and this is largely why I work for myself. Why it's such a great thing to be able to do is not have to sort of suffer these kinds of things. Music and sound, right? All of my music and sound and noise floor making my office sound like a coffee shop. Oh, Pete thinks he's so special. He shuts people out with his headphones all the time. Right?
Yes. That I can see, because people don't realize that it's something you need. They think you're just zoning everybody out and don't want to talk to people. Yeah,
exactly. And then, of course, the fidgets and toys and gadgets and gizmos. Oh, he's addicted to toys, Pete is. He doesn't know what it means to be appropriate in a work environment. That's one that I have gotten probably more than anything else. What does it mean to be appropriate in a work environment? Now, I recognize that a lot has changed and over the years, and particularly, I posted last week, or maybe it's 2 weeks ago now. I posted the CBS This Morning bit about workplaces, work environments that are now changing the way they hire and the way they talk to people, because that's what we've needed, and that's what we've needed to just sort of shine a light on, that says, that people work in different ways, they interact with people in different ways for their own emotional health and productivity, and so we just need to change that conversation. But it doesn't change the fact that it's not fun to be singled out like this. And even worse, other ADHDers have complained about my habits, right? Because my ADHD doesn't look like theirs. Right. And my accommodations run headlong into their accommodations, right? I mean, we work differently. And that's hard. And so this is where I stumble. And then I discovered this fantastic post from Sean Blanc at Sean Blanc. Sean Blanc. He's fantastic. I feel like when I say his name, I imagine him in a tuxedo, kind of James Bond. Sean Blanc, SeanBlanc.net.
It sounds like that. Yes,
it is. And he is another one of those guys who quit his corporate job to, become a creator full time. And he wrote a post about margin. Have you ever heard of this concept of margin?
No.
When I say the word margin in the context of life and productivity, can you guess what it might mean without reading ahead?
Well, to me, my gut is telling me that margin, like I'm thinking a margin of error, like it's giving you some space. It's giving you a little bit of flexibility or wiggle room. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Well, that's a very astute observation, Nikki Kinzer, because that's exactly what it is. As Sean says, margin is breathing room. It is the opposite of overload.
So kind of like when I say buffer time, when I talk about buffer time, it's giving you a margin of time.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's giving you some breathing room. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And in this case, I imagine it like a piece of paper, right? Literally the margin on a piece of paper. All the activity happens in the middle of the paper. Everything on the outside is for doing the things that you couldn't quite fit in the main work area. Like, you scribble in the notes, or when you're a kid and you're writing a sentence and you get to the end of the page and you realize you just didn't plan very well. So you start turning the paper sideways and writing up in circles around the page in the margin. That's margin, right? That's the space outside the space that is important to you. Now, Sean didn't come up with this concept. A fellow named Richard Swenson came up with the topic from, I believe, his book called Margin. And here is the money quote that I want to share with you, and just let it sink in. So from Mr. Swenson, the conditions of modern day living devour margin. If you are homeless, we send you to a shelter. If you are penniless, we offer you food stamps. If you are breathless, we connect you to oxygen. But if you are marginless, we give you one more thing to do. That hit me right in the center of the chest. I mean, you got to let that sink in, right? If you are marginless, we give you one more thing to do. And I adore the concept. I adore the concept from a perspective of productivity, right? And as somebody who loves, thinking about time, I love how margin relates to the actual work I do. But I also wonder, what does margin mean for ADHD, for all these systems and accommodations that I put into my own life to help my brain interact with the world and engage with the world in the way that I need to engage with it? What does margin mean for that? And so I guess I want to propose that margin exists, ADHD margin exists outside of the accommodations that you put into place to keep your life in order and in control. Margin for ADHD is the gray unknown space, the buffer between what you have or what you know and the outcomes that you can't see and don't expect. Right? Mm-hmm. And at the risk of speaking for, everybody who lives with ADHD, I'm going to do it anyway, probably. We hate the margin, right? We have memories of what it's like to live in the margin, and it wasn't pretty. Mm-hmm. It wasn't fun. It was out of control. It was helpless. It made us feel stupid and judged and limited. And that's why we put all of these things, these gates in place, so that we don't have to feel that way anymore, right? We work hard to put systems in place specifically so that we wouldn't have to suffer through the unknown again, so that we take all our systems and we expand them to fill all our space, to account for everything that we can. And when we run into an unknown, then we put a system in place to attempt to account for it, right? It's just how we work. And thus, we have no margin. And that's what I find I run into more than anything else. And then what happens when the rest of the world runs into my margins? What happens when I take my systems to work and people run into the things that I have to do? I have no gray space to account for it. I have no ability to react and respond. What happens when someone at work wants me involved in something that challenges my systems and processes? What happens when I'm asked to intentionally break a system, right, to grant myself access to my own margin? Brainstorming sessions are the worst because I get totally sucked into them, right? I could go for days in a brainstorming session and lose track of everything else. Floating meetings, this is one we had all the time. Yeah, Pete, I need you to jump in on this. We're going to put together this brainstorming session to launch this new project or this new department, but it's kind of tough to nail down a specific time. So what we'd like to do is just have a floating meeting. It's a floating brainstorming session. Are you freaking kidding me?
Right. What is that? What is that?
Everything.
Everything.
Right. It's nonsense, right?
Yes,
a change of space, a change of modality. This meeting we used to have, Pete, we're now going to do it just online. So I'm going to need you to just dial into this conference call instead of showing up face to face. Or this meeting that was a conference call, now I'm going to need you to show up face to face and sit still for an hour and a half. Those things break my systems. They break everything down. And that is when the outside world crushes my margins.
Makes you mad.
That's right. It does.
Frustrating.
So when you think of all this, how does this impact your health?
Oh, yeah, I am assuming in all areas.
Well, yeah, you kind of have to ask that, right?
To, yeah, right.
Right. There's definitely a physical toll, right? There's a physical toll that comes with just the stress, the anxiety, the emotional toll, the intellectual toll. What are you what are you having to force out of your life in order to, to keep your systems in place? The social and relational toll, the people who don't understand you and that you don't have space for them to come to understand you because of these systems. So here's I guess I don't really have an answer to all this, which is super disappointing because I want to have an answer but my ADHD, it doesn't look like anyone else's ADHD. My ADHD does not look today like it did, 5-10 years ago. And so I just have one thing that I don't do enough that I feel like it's important to explore. And so it's a recommendation. Right? A recommendation of aspiration and potential to practice being inspired.
Oh, I love that.
Well, I don't know. Maybe that's a nice thing to practice being inspired. We don't do this very often. And
I think it is a good thing. I think it's a positive thing.
Why? Why do you respond to it then?
Because there are so many things especially I think in today's climate that we could be really discouraged about, right? And when you watch the news and I'm not even just talking about our political environment, but I mean just the shootings that are happening and these terrible accidents and all these things that are happening, and then you're feeling. So you've got the outside world around you that is not great. And then you're feeling all of these things that you just explained. So there's not a lot of positivity going on in your life at this moment, right? And it does vary. I mean, I'm sure there's great days, there's happy days, there's sad days. But I think when you practice being inspired, it does help get you out of the sadness and maybe some of the just the sadness, I think, of maybe how you're feeling and how, you're feeling a little bit more like the world's against you than for you. And there's so much good in this world. And there's so many grateful things that we should be grateful of and are grateful of. But when we don't pay attention to those, they don't shine. But when we do pay attention to those, they shine and they can get us through those really hard times. And so that's why I think practicing being inspired is a really positive thing.
Well, I really appreciate you talking about it that way because I think so too. And I think that I live in a state of fear of being inspired, that inspiration has to come improvisationally. It needs to I need to trip over it in order for it to happen. And so I propose that it's a muscle that needs to be developed. We talk about that all the time, like developing muscles. And we don't do it because if you're living with ADHD and you struggle with either hyperfocus or lack of focus, any sort of focus challenge, like pulling a string on inspiration can be, tugging on a fuse to dynamite, right? It can be a disaster for our productivity and break a lot of other things. But
it also may be a necessity.
Yeah.
So yes, it could very well break the productivity and the focus, but it's just like taking care of your mental. I mean, it's taking care of your mental health.
Right. It's like going for a walk. It's like getting your heart rate up. Right?
Yeah. Exactly. So if you feel like you're in the middle of a breakdown or close to being in the middle of a breakdown, then I think it is a necessity to step back and say, okay, where can I look for some inspiration? Yeah. Where can I look for light? Where can I look for some positive energy?
Well, I mean, and look, the reality is all of us are bouncing around our focus on crazy things from day to day, right? Yes. All day long. It's just what we do.
Of course.
But what would happen if we trained ourselves that, once, that we're going to follow this unexpected path, right? What if we just learn one new thing? What if we make a new relationship with somebody that we don't already know or absolutely have to know for our work, right? What would that change for our emotional and physical and social and relational health? Like, what would that be? So I set a reminder last week. And this is, you can tell I've been stewing on this for a long time. And this is going to sound, maybe it's a little strange, but I'm a reminder guy. Mm-hmm. So I set this reminder and it just says one thing. It said right before I get up to work. And if I settle in to look at my to-do system, around 8:30, 9 o'clock, I set this alert to go off at 8:27 every day. And it just says, say yes to something today and mean it. Say yes to something today and mean it. Because I feel like saying yes is the first step to taking action. It reminds me of Jim Carrey in that movie, in that Yes Man movie, which I find just really delightful and charming in my memory. I don't remember if it was that as great of a movie as my memory says it is. But that's why I'm not going to watch it again.
It's been a long time. Yeah.
I just feel I like the memory of it so much. You just say yes to something. It's taking action, whether you're learning something new or building a new relationship or trying for a new job. But if you're living with ADHD, you're conditioned to say no an awful lot. And we can't forget to say yes. How much are you missing out on because you've become so protective of the ability to say no?
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I want to add one thing to all of this that wasn't really said too much. But as a coach, I see it all the time, is the judgment that ADDers hold. Mm-hmm. And so if there's also something that I would practice or encourage people to practice is not only being inspired, but to let go of their own judgment. Yeah. And that's a process and that's not going to happen overnight. But I can tell you, I have a situation where a lot of judgment was coming into my life. I'm not ADD, so it wasn't about ADHD or any of that. It was in a completely different aspect of my life. But I'll tell you, when you're face to face with someone who is the most judgmental person that you've ever met in your life, and they've gotten worse as they've gotten older, and I feel like as I've gotten older, I've been able to let go of what they think of me. And it makes life easier. Yeah. And in the sense that I don't know how to explain it, but I don't beat myself up over it. Right. It's like I've let it go and I don't want to be that person. And so I think that, and maybe it's because of what I do for a living. I'm probably one of the most unjudgmental people in the world because of what I do for my work. Right. But it was such a realization to kind of see, I don't want to be that person. And I don't want my clients to judge themselves that harshly. So with these accommodations and with these things, like you were saying before, these comments that are being made, somehow in reflection or in inspiration, meditation, whatever it is, being able to let that go as much as you can, I think will make you freer. It will make you a happier person inside. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, it does. But again, it comes back to the margin, right? It comes back to giving yourself, absolutely. Like for me, as you say that, I am imagining that space growing on the side of the paper, I mean, that's what I see is that gray space, that breathing room, the ability to have that. For me, that visualization is really powerful because it reminds me of the level of control that I actually have and the level of control that I have and don't exert, right, over my systems, both to say yes and to say no. And I realize, we usually don't mention it right now, but I realize as I'm talking, I'm just kind of streaming along with the chat room, and there is the other side of this, which is that if you're in the middle of a storm, right, an ADHD storm, it likely comes because you have been saying yes a lot, right, and that is the other side of ADHD. If you don't have like for me, I'm at a different place, and for me, it's all about saying no, and I got so habituated into saying no and hiding that
there is a different, it's the opposite side of where a lot of these things come from. And I really remember that feeling of the disastrous feeling of overwhelm that comes from saying yes to everything. But back to that margin, it gets smaller and smaller until it is just razor thin. And I've said yes too much, and I've lost control completely of my life, and I have no ability to respond, and I can't be creative anymore, and I can't get the work done that I've already committed to anymore. And it's really, really hard. And so I was talking to my wife about this last night, and she was talking about it in the context of her company's perspective on work-life balance. And for them, what they always say about work-life balance is that it's each part of your life, each area of your life has to be flexible in relationship to the others. Right. Goes back to what we say. We only have 24 hours in the day. Right. And so, if your personal life has to be flexible, then you know what else that means, that your work life also has to be flexible, because something's got to give. And so to give ourselves the permission to get out from under the sense of discomfort that comes from saying either yes too much or no too much. Eventually, something's got to give.
I love the visual that you've created here. I see a piece of paper with the margins on the side, because when you first asked me about the margin, I was thinking margin of error. I was thinking like space, right? But you put it in a different context, and I really like that, because now I see a piece of paper with the margins, and am I going past that? Right. Am I protecting that? So I like that. Thank you. That was great.
Thank you. I not mine. I mean, I'll put the link to Sean Blanc's post and his
Peter
conversation
Blanc.
on margin. But you're right. But
we're going to change your last name.
I'll take it. It's one of those that I just think really resonates as we pivot it toward ADHD. And
you bet.
To me, when you think about all that sense of control, and as it relates to all this, that being able to be flexible and think about, like I've been thinking for the last day, what do I need to do to grow that margin? What do I need to do to protect that margin so that I can play more, so that I can learn more, so that I can make some changes, do the things that I want to do with my life. So anyhow, that's what I have for today.
Good show today, Pete.
Well, thank you. Were you nervous? Because you were texting me saying, please tell me you got the show.
I just wanted to make sure you had the show today, because I didn't have anything planned.
I got it. I always got your back.
Thank you. It's like every 4 shows is Pete's, right? Or something like that. And so, so I was like, just please have something. But this was great. This was better than, anything I could have
you're very
thought. I love the angle and the perspective that you bring, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are listening and get what you're saying, and hopefully we'll have a new visual of that margin for themselves. And I have to still say, as a coach, a little less judgment goes a long way.
A little less judgment. Yeah. That's right.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, as always, for downloading and listening to the show. We deeply appreciate your time and, of course, your attention. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you next time right here on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.